responsibilities. So the addition is at the end, and I'll make a note where that would be different. So the county shall, upon city bus ceasing to operate, expand UCAT operations in the city, initially operating 3 routes within the city, as well as demand response services set forth in Appendix A to address the needs of city transit riders. The county intends to operate these routes based upon input provided from city transit riders and other stakeholders during previously held meetings. The county shall also, within the first 6 months of operation of the new routes, hold public meetings to assess the effectiveness of the new routes and seek to address, and this is the change, any issues associated with them. In addition, as part of the expanded service within the city, the county will continue to evaluate its service using route data, input from transit users, changes in destinations land use, funding availability, and requests for service changes by city officials and businesses. So it kind of gives us a little bit more of a window to make sure that's kind of what you had envisioned.
Yeah, it would kind of be included in there with the city officials. Because my idea was that, what I wanted added was that if at some point things change that are specific to the city, I'd like the future councils have the ability to have a meeting and request that the county look into changing the routes, and that kind of does that, just so that they would then address. It's not saying that they have to do it, but at least that we would then have some say in the future. You know, for instance, if there's an apartment complex somewhere that the buses go to now, and that becomes a theme park or something, and there's an apartment complex 2 blocks down, obviously we'd want to change that. I mean, they might anyway, but I think it's still, it would be better if future councils had the ability to ask the county to bring it forth. So
Yeah, I think that with
probably
the request for service changes by city officials,
Yeah.
I think that's the part that covered that.
That was.
The other thing that I contacted the county about, another question that we had was what would happen when the routes are changed at the beginning of the merger. That do they need to go through the same process that Dennis Doyle had outlined in the question that I asked him before last caucus? And he said the same process as we have federal requirements, and we would take the opportunity to answer questions, ease concerns, and yes, amend the routes in response to subsequent comment. So all of these changes, the proposed changes, still have to go through public hearings and then a public comment section of time. Yeah.
Okay, in the meantime, would they just, with the current city routes, would it defer just to the current city routes? Like, because there's going to be a gap in time then from when that happened, so what would happen in the interim with them?
That I don't know.
They would have to stay the same.
I would think they would stay there, right? So
federal government has
because
to
technically
approve
they
the
couldn't
changes.
change it whether the city had it or whether someone else had it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it would stand to reason, but I just
If they can't change it any other way, then it would have to stay the same.
so the routes wouldn't change
Right.
until at that. Okay.
So we would have, and he didn't give me an exact time, he just said, think months, when the first, so change in routes also require an FDA notification and completion of the federal process. The process used is a public meeting on the initial route change, and then after time, think months, a revisit of the route to hear suggestions and complaints. So these are proposed, they all have to go through a process when and if the merger happens. And then even when it is approved, it will be revisited to make
So we have
sure
ample
it's-
time to look at these before we do anything with what we currently have on the table, correct?
Yeah.
Because this is not going to be part of this. This is just something that we're going to want to look for down the road months. Is what's going to happen. That's what this is for.
Right,
Okay.
So this is a change in the contract
yeah,
information on section 3.0, is that correct?
3.03.
All right, so is this, I'm sorry, next speak. Is this language, it just says here, seek to address issues associated with them. Very, very vague language there, to seek something out. I can seek or I can hide. I don't have to do that if I don't
Is this
want
the
to.
beginning of it?
No, is it in the new part or right before that?
The underlined is the new section that
Okay,
was.
but right before it says to seek to address any issues associated. So it's going to be their responsibility to seek to address any issues associated with them. It just seems a little vague for me. And in addition, hang on one second.
Well, that was specifically within the first 6
And
months.
requests for service changes by city officials and businesses. Again, request, I'm just looking at the language here and thinking, these are maybe, maybe not kind of things we could do, right? I don't know. So it doesn't seem like we're demanding anything from them. We're just saying, you can seek, we want you to seek, address any issues. Maybe you'll seek them, maybe you won't. And the other thing is, and then we come down here and request for service changes. So we request it, though, so what?
Well, I think it's maybe, maybe not, until it's determined that maybe it should, or should be not, if that, in other words, as
It's not
things
like,
come up, we're
it
gonna
does-
deal
Doc,
with
it doesn't say you will, right? You will do this. It doesn't say you will do it, it just says, it says in very vague kind of language. Maybe we can seek this and maybe we can request this. I don't know. If it was me, this is not a very tight responsibility. It seems kind of vague. That's
Ready?
all.
The point here, though, is that once we merge the two systems, it's not an us versus them. And so this is then part of a large process that the state, that the county would have to go through and or the city would have to go through if we kept our separate bus system. We have to go to the federal government, other authorities, in order to get any changes made. So this is a cooperative system, and that's why you've got language like that. If we had demand and words like that, that would suggest that there was still a distinction, that we had kind of a separate interest. But once we merge the two systems, then the county is going to be as interested in making sure that our routes are well-serving as they are their current county routes. So to me, this is not a big issue, whether the word is more demonstrative like demand or whether seeks, because it has to go through that same process. And we can kick that into gear by making the request.
And you have to remember that our constituents are also the county's constituents too. So it's not like they're going to not look out for the best interests of their constituents.
Kingston residents will still be voting for the county executive, for example.
Bill?
Also, I think the part where it says seek, that's within the first 6 months, so they're going to seek to just kind of evaluate within the first 6 months. I think the part that's added has a little bit more permanence.
Right, I think that's why we added it, because we
To
wanted
request
to
for
make sure
services,
it wasn't
but-
just gonna be 6 months of seeking concerns and seeking to address any concerns.
Right, so going
but
forward,
seeing
having more
going
of a permanent
forward.
basis. And I would, if there was something stronger, we could say, but again, we can't demand it. Because even when I first brought it up to Corp Council, my point was that just to have something that we can then, bring it forward to them that they would address. So that's, I guess that would be more of a request for route changes at that point. But I understand where you're coming from.
Anybody else have any concerns on?
Well, I have a couple. Well, I don't like any of the beginning of the memorandum, I'll tell you that. It talks about, whereas the city has struggled to meet its federal and state grant obligations, given the limited personnel available for administration and oversight. Whereas the city's 3 main bus routes carry passenger drivers destined outside the city limits but within Ulster County, and these are important designations for riders. And then the next whereas, it's down at the bottom, compliance with all additional costs to the county, and that such a system would be in compliance with all federal and state grants that each entity has received or expended for transit services. That just leaves it open that if there's additional costs other than 1.25 million, can they just add that additional cost onto the city if they feel that they're something they didn't figure on, and all of a sudden, it's going to cost them money, and let's go back to the city and they can fill the gap? You know, I mean, it paints it like it's a hurting transportation system, and they're doing us a favor, as he said when he was here, and it possibly could cost them more money than they figured. And just be aware of that if they come back to you.
Well, that's what I asked,
Okay.
because there were a couple spots where, I'm sorry, I should have been, because there were a couple other spots that, but we were told that these dollar figures were locked in, isn't that right?
Yes.
But anyway, I'm
Then
sorry.
Then we can
I
take that
interrupted.
other thing out of there, then,
The whereases are not contractual. The key is what's in the contract, and the contract gives very specific money amounts for a very specific time period, and we do not owe one penny more over those.
and you got your degree where? Your
Which
lawyer,
one?
lawyer degree?
Which degree?
Your lawyer degree.
Is that right there?
I got it at Jim Nickel University.
Right, but the money
We've had
part,
this discussion many times.
The
As far as
lawyers
I'm
need-
concerned, none of your resolutions should have whereas clauses. Just say whereas it's in the best interest of the city and go on to what you're resolving.
Well, I'd be in favor of that.
But I haven't read the actual document that you're looking at. So what you're,
Well, it goes, whereas in response to the difficulties associated with the city's transit system, the county needs to have part of an agreement for sales tax distribution, is whereasing that whole deal, and
those are not part of the contract because they're not, yeah. Now therefore, the parties here to set forth their understanding of the undertaking as follows. After that, that's the terms of the contract.
Okay, so that's the contract, section 1, 2, 3 there, right?
Correct.
The whereases are all just
Yeah, there's
fun
general
to write.
statements that.
Nice to write those things up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know to what extent the whereas clauses were, made part of the memorandum of agreement by, consent of the parties and how much anybody is wedded to them, but they are certainly not part of the contract.
and it does relate in the whereas sections in the general law too. That doesn't mean anything, like references section 1.2.
Well, I didn't say it doesn't mean anything, it's just not part of the contract itself. The agreement is what is set forth after it says agreed as follows.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
so I understand what Jim's saying, so these are not part of the contract, this is our documentation, so why can't we just remove some of these negative whereas? Why are they needed here if they're not part of the contract? So like Jim's saying, why has struggled to meet the financial, federal and state grant obligation system? Who says we have struggled?
Yeah, I mean, why is that in this whereas statement?
Yeah, we don't need that in there, so who is the body here? I guess that's the right to find us there. We could strike some of them, I don't know if we can do it here or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was my understanding, the original discussion was that, oh yeah, you're in such bad shape and everything, but all that stuff has been cleared up, so it shouldn't be that now.
I thought so too. That's what I was.
That's correct, I thought that too.
Of course, Dan just left the room, so I don't know the process of that, so.
I think he went to make a call actually
Oh, okay.
about it.
yeah, I think if we, I don't have any problem.
One of the whereases before you get to the contract part is actually the stipulation for the financial agreement. So are you saying that that's not part of the contract? That one right before the therefore be it resolved?
Right.
That's where it outlines the payments that the city is going to be making? Is that not contractual?
I think what Dan said, you should just put whereas this is in the best interest of the city of Kingston, and then go ahead and talk about what you want to talk about,
Right.
Right.
So this is more of a-
That language is repeated in the contract. So it has to be in the memorandum of agreement. Whatever's in the whereas has no legal standing.
I think that's what Dan just left to find out, so.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thanks. So there's nothing about adding service, just about changing routes then?
That's what this says right here.
The addition that we received today says, In addition, as part of the expanded service within the city, the county will continue to evaluate services using route data, input from transit users, changes in destinations, land use, funding availability, and requests for service changes. So that would, it's not saying.
Funding
route changes.
availability, service changes, not just routes.
Exactly.
Oh,
So it
okay.
kind of made it a little bit more open,
Yeah.
so that, stuff like that, you know, like if we want to request Sunday services, there's nothing that says we can't now, with the
Right.
addition of that.
Okay.
What?
So I brought Steve back to address the whereas clauses that were brought up, so.
Yeah, we had some questions about the whereas. First of all, why do we need them there when most of it is, you know, is more, the contract is the legally binding part of it. Had some issues with, for example, was it the first one, Jim?
We struggle to
Yeah.
meet its
Whatever,
federal and
the one
state.
that-
All the negative ones.
Yeah, some of the negative ones, like why do we have to say that we're struggling? 'Cause, you know, and which one is that? So I could read it.
Struggle to meet its federal and state grant obligations.
Like, could we
Because like you
just
said,
get
that
rid of
actually
some of
got,
these whereas and just have.
I thought that got cleaned up, Steve.
The whereases were developed, you know, in cooperation with the county. I think that we did make some changes during the first draft that kind of, you know, tightened up some of the whereas statements. I think, you know, why that's there and, you know, why the county wants to have something like that is that, you know, their goal was to be able to have a document that not only showed the county legislators that are gonna have to vote on the same thing and all of you, but also our kind of federal and state regulators. Like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we getting out of the bus business? Are we just doing it because it's fun as you get out of the bus business? Or are there reasons why we're getting out of the bus business? Is it just a financial reason to us? Is it a service reason? You know, what are some of the things that we've struggled with over the years? And I think that, you know, I don't think that there's any statements on there that aren't true, but I recognize that, you know, it's sometimes hard to see it written down. I think that the county is flexible with some of that verbiage. And I think that if out of this committee, you know, comes a request to the county to, you know, change some of that language, you know, we can take that to them. But again, I think that that was the reason, was to kind of lay out how we got to this point. Some of that verbiage was also already in some of the different transit studies that were done over the years that talked about, you know, some of the struggles that our city bus system faces in terms of limited staffing, limited resources, older fleets, you know, difficulties meeting all of the new kind of mandates that are coming from the federal government in terms of all of the different audits that we have to do, the triennial reviews. I think all of you were well aware of the triennial review that we had to go through and all of the different policies that we needed to update and continue to need to update. You know, I think that the state changes their requirements for, you know, our substance abuse policy. And literally, I think we've had to come back to the council 3 times in the last 2.5 years to change the city buses policies related to that because the feds keep changing it, which then becomes a regulatory burden for us. So, you know, the county and you know, our team wanted to just kind of get it all out there. But again, if you guys have changes, it's not the MOA, it's really not the binding piece of this. And so I'm flexible. I didn't write the language, and so I'm flexible in, you know, going back to the county and saying, hey, look, the committee wants this whereas, and this whereas, cut, you know. What they then put in their own resolution, we can't control. So, you know, you can control this whereas.
But don't you think if they were gonna sell it to the legislators, that's what you're saying they wanna do, this merger, they would say all the reasons that the county would gain from it and put that in, so when the legislators, oh yeah, this is good for us, let's do it. Don't you think it would be that, instead of saying, why are you taking on something that, they're not that great a shape? That seems to be reverse to what I would think that you would put in something.
yeah, you want to put a positive spin on the takeover rather than a
That's what
negative.
I would
No,
say.
I can see that.
Well, but another way of looking at it is that the county might be saying that the county has to take care of all of its residents, which includes residents of Kingston. And so if there's bad bus service in part of the county, which happens to be in Kingston, then if the county can do that in a cost-effective way and a beneficial way, then it behooves them to do that.
Well, then they should list that in there.
And the city also.
Say, well, we're gonna help out the city residents by, you know, taking over the bus system, because they have a lot of problems. Not the way it's said here, it's just telling all the problems, not saying that's what we're doing, it's just all your problems. Which I thought all the problems were pretty much caught up and taken care of, you know, the grants and things like that, we're all okay now.
Getting there.
So,
Still don't have our grants submitted yet for this year, but we're working on it.
okay.
And one of them, it says that given the limited personnel available for administration and oversight, I mean, it is understaffed.
Oh, yeah, big time.
So, I don't think anybody would disagree with that part of it.
Well, we all want the best service we possibly can have for the residents of the city, and that's why I think we're asking these questions and things. I have another question which behooves me what this actually means. Demand response areas. Can anybody explain that to me, what that is?
So if you look on that map behind you, those green areas are the areas that are not within a certain distance or mileage of a city bus route. So
Okay.
those areas exist today. And what demand response means is that someone can call for a city bus, in those areas. They will send a vehicle to come and get that person and drop them off at the nearest bus stop, so that they would be able to take a bus and connect to the system. And so,
It would take notice, right? I mean, that they would have to do that.
yes, you have to call in advance,
Yeah.
24 hours, right, to be able to do that. And so those are, again, areas currently that are underserved, but this just demand response is a new way of kind of setting up, getting people into the traditional.
Steve, how did they come up with that? What was
Patrick,
it?
Tony, and then Jeffrey.
I'm sorry, what was the criteria for that demand? I
Concerning
can
that-
see that Ward 7 is greatly affected by that green area.
Yeah, well, so most of Ward 7 that you see there is the Hudson Landing property that's undeveloped.
Well, I'm just talking about my
Oh, yeah, so there's
streets.
a couple of streets there.
No, we got
First, second, and
all
third.
First, Second Avenue, and then here, but,
Yeah, so those areas are currently not served by city bus right today.
yeah, no, they're not served, they're not
No,
served.
and so and that's what that's identifying, is that folks, because they are so far from the traditional bus system that comes down Delaware, that they would be able to call and get picked up and brought to the nearest bus stop, because it's too far to walk, basically, to the bus stop.
Yeah. I'm also concerned about my constituents in this area here, which is by, here's Mickey's Igloo, back in here. This is a very dangerous road to walk down, and there's Flatbush Avenue here. I don't know if you've ever gone around that, we've all gone around that curve. It's very dangerous walking, so they would have to, hike all the way down here, and then down to here and over to get to there, and they couldn't access the demand response. So I think some people are almost a little isolated there, Steve, at the end of my ward, that I'm a little concerned about. And I'm concerned about my entire ward, actually. These people have to, this is the top of the hill here. This is Clifton Avenue. And this is, they call my ward the Hills, and it has good reasons for that. All the postal workers and newspaper deliverers and politicians know why they call it that. But this is all steep hills in here, and these people would all have to hike down these steep hills. I'm a little concerned about my constituents not having that Clifton Avenue route any longer. These steep hills and this isolation pocket at the end.
And the residents of the Alms House.
And of course, there's nothing going there now.
Well, you also have to remember that, and then we'll get to Tony's question, but also have to remember that all of this is proposed and that we could make these changes during the public hearing. And I assume that that includes the demand response zones. Because Dennis told me there's the route, so we still have, it's not, this isn't set in stone. We still have public hearings. We'll still have a time period after that to also take into consideration. Just Tony had a question, and then Jeffrey.
I can't see it for a minute. Is that blue?
There's
Blue
one
area?
over here too.
So this blue area is good? What's the blue and red? What's the difference?
They're bus routes.
Doug, can you move your
Blue, red, and yellow, 3 bus routes.
So what's the current route right here? What's the current route? Does it say?
No, these are the proposed.
These are the proposed routes right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Here is, if you can see, this is the existing.
There you go.
I don't think it's agreed yet.
Yeah, that's better.
But it's upside down.
Tony,
So it's 3 routes, right?
I thought it was I thought you had 3 different.
Yeah.
Right now, it's proposed 3 routes that they're gonna be, yeah.
Similar to the 3 routes we currently have.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, so it doesn't, you know, my constituents are still, for the most part.
I haven't gone through all that.
Well, he's looking at that.
Jeffrey had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My question was, that's okay. My question was, so if for example, they keep getting, let's say they get 2 phone calls a day for request for service in one of these green areas, would that then prompt them to add a route there? Or
Yes.
do they have that option?
I mean, I think that, you know, the county picks the routes based on the amount of riders on that route, or proposed riders on that route, and the amount of, you know, time it takes to get from place to place. And so generally, you know, if you have those 1 or 2 riders that, you know, need to take the bus, either like kind of this demand response system would kick in, or paratransit would kick in and pick them up that way.
Okay.
Where we see a lot of our ridership currently in Kingston gets picked up by paratransit, where you have pre-arranged times for folks to get picked up. But we, you know, generally see most of our, you know, current bus riders on kind of the fixed routes, because we currently don't have these demand response systems in place. It's either you're either paratransit or that. But I don't know about any of you, but I have never gotten a call asking to have, like, wishing that they were closer to a bus stop or figuring out how to get to picked up by the bus. Generally, most of our constituents seemingly have been served, you know, well by the current, you know, system that we have.
Steve, can you, is there statistics on the Clifton Avenue bus, how many people ride it or anything like that?
I don't have that.
Is there, I mean, has anybody looked at that?
Yeah, there are 2 studies that have
There's
been
2
done.
studies. The studies are online. I think I've shared it with you. The transit integration study. Not only did they kind of map out all of these new routes, but they also, you know, counted passengers on the buses. And not only did they count the passengers on the buses, but they also did actual surveys. And so I know Andrea had been in touch with Dennis Doyle and, you know, kind of shared some of his emails, but he, you know, is a wealth of information. If you can't find what you're looking for in the study, you know, we, you know, but all of the details are in there in terms of exactly how many riders per route.
And going back to Jeffrey's question, in the new language, or the addition, it does say, the county will continue to evaluate its service using route data, input from transit users, changes in destinations, land use, funding. So I think that they'll continue to.
Because I'm just thinking about somebody who, for example, works. Would they need to then call for that service every single day if they need the bus every day?
Yeah, I think that once they call once to say this is going to be like a normal pickup time to kind of get to the system, it's kind of set similar to paratransit. Like if someone tells the bus staff that, you know, they have a bi-weekly doctor's appointment that they need to get to, it just gets put in the scheduling system.
Okay.
This is the kind of services that we can't provide because we don't have the staff to be able to do it. We don't have enough staff to do all of that. So.
No, I'm saying that as a gain, actually.
Well, we provided that through the bus routes, being close.
Has this contract touched on all of some of the, I guess, statements by the people doing the integration plan, like bus stops and the physical conditions, improvements or new locations, or more bicycle racks, or anything like that on any of the county buses coming in? And have they already made their contacts with property owners to keep the bus stop that they have if it's on somebody's property, or all that required?
Once the proposed routes are approved, the county would work to set up bus stops at, you know, whether using the existing bus stops, but as some of you may remember, the bus stops that exist are currently not ours anyway. That was part of
I think that company went out of business, didn't it, or something?
I don't know, but they're not
Okay.
ours. So
There's nobody's.
They're not ours. No, because they're still advertisements. They're owned by an advertising company, except for the one in Academy Green. That one is the city's. That's the only one. But the county would work, you know, with the routes to set up where the shelters are.
And they would take care of any additional stuff that we don't have now, if people would be looking to have it.
Any more concerns or questions?
These shelters, what do they look like, Steve, do you know?
The bus stops?
The county bus stops, what do they, I can't picture it right now.
Oh, I mean,
What would
they're.
a county bus stop look like as opposed to some other bus stop? So I'm a little concerned about the aesthetics of the city.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't ride the UCAT bus a lot.
Okay.
But I think that, if they're able to, find bus stops, again, I think that they wanna, have a positive working relationship with the city, and I think that they'll work with all of us as they kind of go through this bus, effort. I don't see them, wanting to themselves, put things in the city that we don't want, or
Yeah,
that
I
we think
remember-
we complain about, because they don't want your phone call just as much as they would want my phone call. And so, I think that they, like all public servants, want to try to make sure that they're meeting our needs and that they, want to have a positive working experience with us.
No, I was just gonna say, some of the bus stops in the town of Ulster, I think are very nice. Just want a bit in there, nothing ever seems like an eyesore as I'm driving to see my parents, so. Past a couple bus stations.
Can riders pick up along the route? Can they just go out to the end of their street and pick up the bus at the end of their street? Or do they have to go to one of these designated bus stops to get a bus? Like, it's a long haul from near Kingston Hospital all the way to Colonial Gardens for anybody in this area. Andrea, I think these are your constituents too. I mean, that's a long haul from the corner of Foxhall and let's say, I don't know, by
Downtown.
I don't
Yeah,
think,
that's
sorry,
a-
Patrick, I don't think the bus stops are on the maps that you're looking at. I mean, I could be wrong, but I know, I'm looking at, I've been working on the Broadway project.
Yeah.
Just along Broadway alone, I think I'm installing 6 bus stops along a 3-block radius.
Well, I know when I was reading.
Oh, yeah, I don't
Those
see
are
them.
just-
They're
I
not
think
here.
that- No, they're not there. I think that those are just the hubs that you see.
Oh, these
the
are
stars.
hubs.
So that's where multiple, kind of bus lines need to connect.
Okay.
What you're also seeing, I think, at least on most of these, you're just seeing the 3 routes that are the old, kind of the new version of the Kingston routes, but there are twice as many routes. And there's another map in the integration study that shows our 3 new proposed routes overlaid with the existing county routes. And so there are other county buses that will be going through the city that go to the mall, other buses that go to Rosendale, other buses that go to Hurley, to the college. They will interconnect and cross through our current map that you see, which will provide even more service. And so you may only need to go kind of a 5-block radius, but if you have 2 UCAT buses going that same direction, they may be only 10 minutes apart. You can catch either bus. One may eventually be going all the way to Stone Ridge, but one may only be going to Hurley. But that's still that same bus through Kingston will still serve whatever passengers at that bus stop as long as they get off where they need to. And so there will be, dozens and dozens. I mean, we currently in the city have dozens of bus stops. I mean, you don't notice until you really drive around. There's the ones that have actual
Well,
shelters.
The
but
one
then
that
there
was
are-
going down Delaware, if you
Yeah.
look at the city's route now, you can stop at Newkirk Avenue, stop at the White Eagle. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of,
If you look at our
stops
website,
along there.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering I wonder how that's gonna continue, because I look at the 7th Ward here, and, it's literally outlining the 7th Ward, and I'm just concerned that there's gonna be some people who are gonna have to walk a long way to get a bus.
Yeah, I think he's got a valid point. Can a citizen just, who may be having trouble walking or in a wheelchair, go between 2 bus stops and still be picked up? Some cities, they absolutely will not do that. Are we gonna do that?
My understanding is that if there is a need, and the bus stops are so far apart, there'd be no reason why the county wouldn't want to move the bus stop or, create a new bus stop. They won't I don't believe it's safe to just flag the bus. Because I think that, you know, you could have people walking in unsafe places. You know, bus stops should be near sidewalks, they
I
should
know.
be at corners. They
That's
should
why
be at-
most cities won't
there should-
do that.
There should be visible areas, but they will work to, just like we have worked. If we need to move bus stops, if we need to make them more convenient, if we need to have better signage, to be able to make sure that we don't have people. Because the goal is, in all of this, is to get more people to ride the bus, not to get less people to ride the bus. And so, you know, we want to be able to, and their funding depends on it. You know, this, you know, concept of this integration depends on getting more bus riders. And so they're going to want to do everything that they can to capture. And we don't have that many riders in the city, and so everyone is important to the system. And so I don't think they're going to do anything that's going to make, you know, one of your residents have to walk, you know, half a mile to the bus stop. It's just that wouldn't make sense to do. It really wouldn't.
Yeah, we're all their, like I said earlier, we're all their constituents. So they're gonna need to make us happy. They're gonna make our constituents
Yeah, well,
happy.
I have another question.
Sure.
It's about the rates. Now, our rates are $1 now, and the counties are $1.50. So, now do they follow our other discounts? Like, I don't think we charge the veterans. I don't think we charge seniors, or very reduced rate. I mean, they're keeping the rates, and we're just increasing.
So my understanding with the rate proposals that they've made with this project is that they have indicated that all of our riders are going to be free for the next 6 months, and so that's part of their 2019 budget. And so from July 1st through the end of December, all riders will be free in the city of Kingston, to try to entice more people to use it, to be able to get the demand to swell. They'll be able to then have a better sense of where all of these people are coming from, taking cost barriers away. They hope to then be able to use that 6-month period of really trying to adjust the routes, make sure they're right, and not have money be an option. After that, you know, if they were to change the routes or the price at the end, they have to, again, go through the same public process that you all would have to do. You'd have to hold a public meeting, you'd have to have a public hearing, you'd have to advertise the rates. By FTA, you still have to have a half fare for seniors. That's part of their regulations, is you have to offer a half fare. They also offer free busing for veterans, and I believe that they offer free busing for SUNY Ulster, but again, I don't run the county bus system. You'd have to check with them about what discounts they offer, but I do believe that, you know, that is on their radar to continue to provide those types of costs, you know, discounts to residents.
Yeah, I did have that confirmed with Dennis, that it would go through the same thing that I was talking about with proposed routes, including at the beginning of the service change, is with fares too. It's routes and fares that would have to go through that same process, of public hearing and then public comment for, he didn't say the exact amount of months, he just said think months. So.
You know, I keep hearing that, you know, these are gonna be they're gonna be their constituents too, and I get that, but the county is so much different than the city. And we really need to keep that in mind. The mindset of people changes from where they live. And we live in the city of Kingston. And, you know, to live in a city is different than living in the county. And when we're changing something like this, it's so important to think about who's controlling our bus system. Is it people who live and work in these conditions that we do and have to get to work under those conditions? If you live in Gardner, you don't live in these conditions. If you live in other parts of the county, you don't live in these conditions. You don't understand these conditions, but you'll be voting on these conditions. Nobody here, everybody here lives in these conditions. We understand it better than anybody. So when we say that they're going to be their constituents, that's true for a few of their members, but for us, it's all of us. We all live here. We're all concerned about our bus people. You know, keep that in mind. So you can say that, but some guy from Gardner doesn't live in Kingston, New York, or, you know, maybe use their bus system. You know, so I think I think we have to think about that. We live in the city. We're city folk.
City mice versus country mice.
Nothing? Okay.
Like I said, I think,
Okay.
I think you guys have been, we've gone over this enough, and it's, it seems like, I'm not sure, and I think this is what Bill is intending to, when he first approached Corporation Council about getting some literature in there, and if you guys are okay with this literature here, that gives us a little bit of flexibility to be able to go back and say, you know, the city of Kingston, we got some concerns about the bus routes, and can you look at adding or changing a bus route? And I think that's the language, that might be the only language we can put in, you know, if we can get some of that language in there before we, you know, move forward with this, that will give the city now and in the future, and some flexibility to say, these routes that you have now are not working, and can we change it, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure if it's in this and in here already, but if not, we gotta make sure it's a good piece of legislation. I did see it, and I know some people brought some questions up still about, does it still give us some flexibility to go to the county and say, can you look at these routes? Now, once the county takes over, they're gonna take over that. If we can get some language in there where it says, you know, whoever, the council should be able to come back and say, we're getting calls from the constituents that this is not working, can you change this route, add this route? Can you guys look at that? And if we can get some of that language there, I think that would make most everybody comfortable.
Well, I think the two things I like about adding that, yeah, could it be stronger? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure what would work best for everyone involved. But I like the fact that it does say that the city council can request, you know, and it lists other people that can as well. But it does specifically say that we can request changes. And I also like the fact that it extends beyond like the initial 6 months. It was originally just said like
It was unclear.
originally just said for like the first 6 months. So that kind of makes it a more of a permanent. We can, you know, you can request it on a permanent basis. So those are the two things I like about.
There's also
the additional-
some, under section 1.03A, we also have a little bit of this too, where, especially the second sentence, the county and the city shall maintain a good working relationship with the FDA, including preparing and providing information requested about each municipality's transit system in a complete and timely manner. So that also gives us input, thank you.
And where is that?
This is in the MOA, section 1.03A. Would you like to read it? You have a substance.
Your board has no service.
Other
None.
top paragraph.
This is a proposed
How do you like
route.
me now?
This is, don't fixate on the proposal.
We just have to, you know, like you're saying, we just have to make sure that we're following this along, and we just don't get this, you know, past the merger and then wash our hands of it. We still have to take care of our constituents and make sure that these routes, the proposed routes, are the actual routes after the proposed are the best for our constituents. Like we could still, it's not like we sign this and then we're washing our hands from it. It would be our obligation and future council's obligation to be aware of this throughout. So it's not like we're washing our hands.
Only
from
if we
this.
imply that, not imply, but only if we state that language in the contract. After we get signed that contract, it's the contract, right,
Yeah, it's the
council?
contract.
Yeah, it's the contract, so you can say all you want about, it's gonna be, we're gonna talk nice with the county, but if it's not in the contract, they're gonna hold us to that.
The amendments, or the proposed amendments to 3.03 specifically say, changing the destination counties unavailable and requests for service changes by city officials and businesses, and that is moving forward. So anytime after the execution of the contract, if you have a request for a service change, okay, that request should be sent to the county, and the county, according to this language, must consider it. They don't have to agree with it, but they must consider it through the process that is set forth and described already.
Is that it? What, Wouldn't that just be the normal process? Wouldn't that just be the normal process?
It didn't, not,
It-
I didn't think it would have been, because it didn't really specific, that, I mean, that's a little stronger than what was what was in there before. It was much more vague, I think,
Thanks.
before.
Thank you, Bill.
You know, but again, I understand your concerns. That was my concern right in the beginning, but, I mean, I'm okay with that. That, to me, gives the opportunity to at least ask the county, request that the county bring this before the legislators. And that's, you know, at that point, that's, you know, that's what we can, you know, again, we can't demand that. So. Can't demand they agree, that is. We can demand that they look at it, but then we
It's in
can't.
there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, between that one, so 103, 1.03 and 3.03, kind of cover us as much as we can while making the service better by giving it to the county. So I made the same resolution, is that the process of this, or?
Resolution to authorize the mayor to execute the contract.
Yeah, the same thing that we had, yeah. All right, so I'm going to read the resolution, unless anybody has any, oh, sorry.
I have one more question. Now, I'm looking at the budget. I'm sure everybody's looked at it already. And it says a total expense of $961,642, and the total revenue is $834 even. So that's like 70-some thousand for 219. So, I mean, I know I've heard 225 as the number, but this is showing a lesser number.
I unfortunately you were away at the last finance meeting, but the council members went over that with John Toohey, who provided them with 5 years of city bus costs. And the average breakout, I guess, over those 5 years was $300K in the red for the city on average over those 5 years.
But have we turned a corner or something?
Nope.
Because it's only
It's just-
74 here.
Well, because, you know, we've, over the last 3 years, have cut down, you know, and lost a variety of drivers for a couple of different reasons, full-time drivers, and so a lot of our runs are being covered by overtime. And so what you don't see there are the overtime costs and the budget transfers that Tony has come to you already with numerous times, and will be coming again when we do the budget transfers in March. You know, so it's just, unfortunately, you know, we've done some, I think this year maybe closer to 225 in the red, but on average, to really fully run the system, I mean, just to give you a sense, like right now, you know, there used to be 3 full-time administrative staff in the department. The dispatcher retired and was not replaced, and 2 budgets ago. The current clerk just resigned and is gone. And so now there's just 1 person over there. And so we're obviously seeing budgetary savings, but at this moment, but this is not how we, you know, we're now currently using drivers to kind of help, you know, answer the phones when they're in between runs and things like that. That's not a long-term solution. And so if we were to do this bus system ourselves and to do it well and to bring our routes from an hour down to 45 minutes or 30 minutes per bus, you know, we would have to hire a couple more administrative staff, we'd have to bring on a couple more drivers, buy a couple more buses, and so we clearly would be in that 300 plus range each year.
And you feel that the money that we're appropriating, 1,225,000 or 125, is the entire cost that the city will have to deal with and hand over to the county? Not talking about the grants that are out there yet and money from those and whatever, but I mean.
Yeah, the only cost that we will have going forward is, you know, taking, as we had talked about previously, the administrative staff and working them into open positions here in the city.
Mhm.
All of the full-time bus drivers will be offered positions at UCAT. So we will have to internally bring on that 1 position that's left, but I think we can do that without, you know, impacting the budget. That's the only long-term, you know, cost that we really see.
Because the mechanic is phasing out.
We've removed that mechanic in this year's budget, yeah, for 2019.
at 225,000 for the next 5 years.
And then, and
1.1, and then in 2019, it's another 112,000.
yeah, the rest of this year, yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one thing. So Jim, when you're talking about the whereas clauses,
Oh.
Yes.
what I understand is the only one that is really objectionable is the whereas the city has struggled to meet its federal and state grant obligations given the limited personnel available for administration and oversight. That's the one that is problematic as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I mean, the one above that, you know,
I
I mean, that was self-induced also with the drivers. I mean, you say you're disbanding the service, so you probably get,
It declined over 35% between 2004 and 2017. That's factual. There is difficulty filling driver positions. That's factual.
but what's the county's
As
decline?
well as the need to commit to significant capital investments in the near future. So if we just eliminate the city has struggled,
Yes.
I mean, the rest of them don't really seem to be
No, they're okay.
negative. You know, so.
Can we just take that out?
Well, you
or
can
kind of-
certainly, in the resolution, you can pass the resolution as is, and you can direct it, you know, that we go back to the county and ask if there's any objection to just removing that one line.
You could change that verbiage, and whereas the city.
Well, it's competitively, I mean.
Well, that we don't need, because they're gonna do their own
Yeah, you just
whereas anyway, we can we just?
It's not an issue, that
Yeah.
one whereas is not an issue.
Yeah, you know, so we'll go back to them, we'll make sure they have no objection to removing it. You pass the resolution as it is, you vote on it at caucus, and we have an answer for you before caucus if anyone has any objection to that. And, you know,
Will
it
you
should
just
be
be
a deal
taking
breaker.
care of that, or do you want me to follow up with you to make sure that?
I will talk to Kevin tomorrow, Kevin will talk to the county attorney, and we will make sure that they don't have an issue eliminating that one line. And I can't see that anybody will care.
Okay. So, resolution authorizing the dissolution of city bus transit service and approving the entering into an agreement with Ulster County to provide expanded transit service in the city of Kingston and appropriation of funds therefore. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I didn't vote. Alright.
Sorry to drag you out.
Thank you.
Nice land bank meeting. Thank you, everybody. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you, Tony. Well, this won't be very long, so I don't think. But-
Yeah.
I'm just going to read.
It's the same resolution that we passed, that went through finance, I should say, we passed. So the other item on tonight's agenda is charter reform discussion, and so this will be brief, because the idea, Jim and I have been talking, and just kind of bringing it to attention, so he might be able to highlight a little bit more of the history.
I can tell you pretty briefly. This was at a time when we went from, I would say, probably a strong council form of government to a strong mayor form of government. So there was a lot of,
1993, just to-
there was a lot of provisions made, you know, that gave the mayor a lot of additional powers, and, you know, sometimes they didn't correlate all the way through the document and things like that. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So if anyone would know something in the charter that you kind of think you could make a change to, then myself personally, as speaking as the alderman at large, I believe that, you know, the two main positions that we really rely on other than department heads would be our city clerk, which would be also the county clerk, or the council clerk, and our legal advice, which would be the corp counsel. And they happen to be two positions that serve at the pleasure of the mayor. So, I mean, if the mayor's change, then ours, people change, which really we might like the people we have and we'd like to make our own decisions on changes, you know what I mean? So that would be a proposal I would put in, authorizing the council to be able to, if they can still choose to or not choose to, have the power to hire their own clerk of the council and legal counsel for the council as a corporation counsel. They could be full-time, part-time, whatever, but it just gives you more independence. Sometimes, like a change of this last, change, all of a sudden, a different administration comes in, then your possible clerk would go out and you'd get a totally different clerk where you might be perfectly satisfied with the work she's doing and she's non-biased and everything's fine, you're getting your information out. Plus they're spending a little more time on the council instead of all the other duties possibly that's involved in her office, you know what I mean? Or same with the court counsel.
So you're saying have that as a potential, would that then require a budget line for each
Well,
year?
it would if you want to do a change, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And
the
it
idea
would,
with how the charter was written is it was actually written as a city manager form of government, but then quickly changed over to a strong mayor, but it didn't, the language is not consistent, and so the charter is a little bit unclear with what the form of government is. So even though, it is a strong mayor form, and I'm not advocating that we change the form of government by having this conversation. I'm just advocating for the charter to get rid of some of the inconsistencies, to make sure that we create a strong charter that reflects a strong checks and balances system. And what Jim is talking about,
Exactly.
and having that is one example. I'm sure you're all familiar with Dr. Jerry Benjamin, but he has, I can get you some information from him, some of his not suggestions, but some points about our charter with that. And I don't know if I assume you all have read the charter too at some point. Just start to have a conversation of what charter reform would look like in Kingston, whether you want to, do what Jim is doing is just kind of picking out a couple things. I'm trying to think more big picture, but this isn't advocating for a different form of government. This is just making sure the charter that we have, which is essentially our constitution, is clear and strong.
right, just think about it. There could be a lot of things. We have no power to sit in on any committees. We could be liaisons. Maybe we could put something in there that we could sit on a committee. Or maybe we could approve selections, things like that, just to make it more of a fair and balanced government.
And another thing,
That's Fox News,
this is
isn't
a
it? Fair
point
and
from
balanced.
Dr. Benjamin, this is his quote. You talk about the inability of an acting mayor, but you don't talk about how you know when someone is unable to do the job. They may not know if they're not performing. Or another idea is some ideas that this is again Dr. Benjamin, some ideas that I have had such as an ethics provision. You're not punitive, they are directive. You don't have a redistricting provision, and you should, especially as a minority population is a significant population. Periodic charter review and training for elected officials for those coming into government without any background, which I think is also a really good point. I could send you the document or the video. I was considering bringing it, but I figured you all look at me like I'm crazy if I made you watch a video, a movie. Plus the audio is really bad, so I can so we wouldn't really be able to hear it anyway. So if you're interested, I just wanted to, Jim and I have been talking about it for a little bit, and we just wanted to kind of start the conversation and kind of, as I tell my students, and planting the seed. And how much you water it is your decision, but I would like to think big picture on this. And
Andrew, we have, we're being filmed every meeting now.
yes.
And so there's a laptop here. It'd be so easy to hook up some kind of overhead camera device to throw on one of these walls, and we could see documents, we could see lots of different things. That should be something going forward that
We
we
were
do.
advocating for movies.
I'm not advocating for movies.
Well,
I'm
I think
I'm
they're
advocating-
working towards that.
Okay.
Well,
I'm
you know,
advocating for in this room, when we have these meetings, we could have, instead of having this piece of paper, we could have it blown up, thrown on the wall.
But, you know,
And
not-
there's a
not-
bunch of things I would have liked to see, like property in the city of Kingston, maps I would like to see as we're going forward here, but I can't, I'm looking at Randy's phone, you know?
Well, I
It's this
have
big.
no problem, for this
So you're gonna need a
committee.
bigger phone?
but not for anything, but that should be a council
Or we should
initiative
all have our own.
to take care of our own stuff and do that.
Right, and if you let me know ahead of time, like the maps, we got the maps.
Thank you.
Thanks to Lisa. But, yeah, I mean, if you just let me know ahead of time, I'm sure we could figure out a way to make stuff like that work, as long as we have advance notice, because, yeah, that would be nice.
It would only-
to-
I mean,
Well,
Like,
I think he's
pass
talking
around
about
this
live streaming eventually, so we'll have, oh, this is live
This
streaming.
is live
Oh, we
streaming.
already have it.
Hi.
It's not live though.
It's not live, you're right, it's not live. Delayed stream.
Sorry about that.
Take delay in case
I thought she
it
was
says
lying.
something, inappropriate.
Yeah. But anyway, that's what I just wanted to do, is just kind of bring that to folks' attention and start that conversation, so.
But it's something everyone has to think about and look
It
at
would be
it.
a really big thing that we would tackle.
Or even if you don't have a specific plan, just come to talk about it, then maybe we can come up with something.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
I have a question on it. Have you adopted a resolution of the zoning change for the model railroad parcel?
I think we did that, Brian.
Yeah,
You had the hearing, but when did you do the resolution? I don't think you did.
Oh, we'll have to check.
I could be wrong.
okay. No, you might be right.
You know what he's talking about?
All of it was sent to the county, was already submitted to the county. It was
Okay,
on-
so
I
we're
thought we
waiting
had
for
the
the
Public
county.
Yeah,
hearing
we're
before
in
we pass the
Yeah.
legislation.
yeah, but I was.
The request for their comments was sent to the county, correct? And their 30
Everything, the
days
whole
is,
application, everything was sent.
okay, but their 30 days to comment has run.
Has it expired?
I don't think so.
No?
We had to wait till after the public hearing, so.
Okay.
So we still have about a week or so.
When was the public hearing?
When was the public hearing?
Yeah.
It was the
Early
night
in the month, wasn't it?
before caucus, so the 4th, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
It was a very memorable public hearing.
That was your first one, right?
Yeah, it lasted
All right.
about 90 seconds.
They all last about that, so don't be disappointed.
You gotta talk a little slower, and it would have been at 2 minutes.
But I did have a motion to adjourn, I had a second, so all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, have a nice night, thank you.
Thank you.
There's still signatures needed, by the way.